Today I'm here with Smriti Popenoe. She is president of Dynex Capital and a successful leader. She's going to share insights and perspectives of how she navigated her career all the way to the top and what it was like being one of the few women of color in capital markets. Smriti, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Marcia. It's great to be here.
I really enjoy our conversations when we're together, and I'm just going to say it's so nice to have you here in studio. For folks who are watching, we are both vaccinated and still socially distancing, but it is really exciting to be in person. And I want to thank you for your support of mPower and coming and doing this discussion today. To get us started, can you share a little bit about your journey and how you became president of Dynex Capital?
Yeah, it's been an interesting 30 years or so. I'm an immigrant to the United States. I moved here in 1990. And really, my career's lasted, I would say, 3 different blocks. My early career as an analyst really gave me the foundation for what I'm doing today. That foundation was largely done at a very large company that many of your audience probably knows. It was at Freddie Mac. And you know, I was at Freddie Mac at a time when it was a very entrepreneurial company, a very fun place to be, doing lots of very aggressive things in the capital markets, different things in the capital markets. So it was a great learning opportunity for me those first 10 years. My second 10 years really shifted. And this is where I learned to be a bit more adaptable, because I went from a giant company like Freddie Mac with thousands of employees to a startup. That was my second job really after Freddie Mac. And this is where I really learned that being adaptable, being able to go from that large company environment and take on that entrepreneurial spirit and do things really with my own hands, if you will, was very important. So that was sort of the second part. I pivoted over to a large company again at Wachovia Bank. And this is where I like to say that I had about 20 years worth of work experience in 3 years, which is between 06, 07, 08, and 09, so 3.5 years. That was an incredible time, as your audience probably knows, just going through the great financial crisis before and after. So that was fantastic experience from a business perspective for someone like me in the capital markets. And then finally, I took a completely different turn being the chief risk officer. So most of my early career, I actually committed capital, invested, and then I got to be in an oversight role for the first time, which was very interesting, where I didn't actually get to do things, but I got to see what the risk of doing things was. So that was a very different perspective. And then finally, I made it here to Dynex. And you know, I joke at Dynex when I first got here, my title was co-chief investment officer. And so I had 50% of a title, but 100% of the responsibility for the profit and loss of the company. But it's been a great run. Dynex is a great, great company. We've been publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange for over 30 years. So, and we rang the bell a couple of years ago. That was a fantastic experience as well. But really, you know, I think the last couple of years, especially 2020, is what put a capper on you know, this long career, to say, okay, you know, she's done a lot of different things, and it feels right at this point just to be the president of the company. And I'm really proud of the success that our company's had, and I'm proud of myself.
Well, I have to say, congratulations on being president. You know, it's a long journey, a lot of times for women to make it to the top, and you've had so many successful accomplishments. But I've been in the industry a long time like you, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I bet there have been a lot of times where you were the only woman in the room, and I bet there were times, maybe many times, you were the only person of color in the room. Can you describe the best way to navigate being the only when you are the only in the room?
Yeah, I will say to a lot of women and women of color, you know, capital markets is still a very male-dominated industry. They're doing a better job, I think, of the younger generation now, the people who are coming out of college, 20s to 30-year-olds. I see a lot more women I see a lot more young women traders on Wall Street, which is really fantastic. Many of my salespeople are women, whereas back in the day, it was extremely rare to have a woman counterpart on the other side. So things are changing, and I think that's very good. But it's still quite male-dominated. And yes, there were many times where I was the only woman in the room with capital committing authority. So other women might have been in the room, but you were the only one that could actually commit capital, that actually could make those transactions. So it's a different level of responsibility and commands a different level of respect because you're actually making those investment decisions. My first thought is it's a lonely place because you are the only, and it was lonely. So, but that doesn't need to define your experience. And what I would say to people who find themselves in that position is to really think about what kind of an advantage it is. So often, when I was the only person in the room that was of color or a woman, when you spoke, everybody listened. They weren't tuning you out. So there's a real benefit to being that only person, and you can think about it rather than saying, well, I'm the only person of this and I feel lonely or lost. It can become an advantage. I am the only. People can take notice of me, and when I do speak, people can listen, and therefore be thoughtful about converting what appears to be on the face of it a disadvantage into an advantage. And that requires some self-talk, right? And planning and preparation and doing some work in advance to make sure that you've got that confidence, you're projecting, the advantage, if you will.
Right. And you validate the assumption that it's still very male-dominated in the capital markets arena. But you're seeing a lot of women coming into the field, and, over time, I think, that trend will be more balanced. And you had confidence because you also knew you had power, right? You had decision-making power. You could commit the capital.
Yes.
When you first were one of the only women in the room, maybe you hadn't gotten to that level yet, what did you do to build your confidence as you went in there to make sure your voice was heard and your points were made?
Well, I became the expert. Okay.
Hard work.
Yeah, hard work. So I was the only one as a young analyst that knew on the trading floor how to use this one particular system. It was called Yieldbook. It was built by Solomon Brothers. I went in there and learned the guts of everything and figured out how the models worked to be able to talk to the output and the analysis. And so when you become the expert, people listen to what you have to say. Not everybody listened. But then, you do get that reputation of saying this person actually knows these things. So you do have to have the work ethic. You have to have something that differentiates you, and you have to be able to get the confidence. The confidence comes from knowledge. The confidence comes from the fact that you've mastered something, and so why not talk about it?
Right. I think that's great advice, right? I call it being sure-footed. When you know inside and out your field of expertise, what you're talking about, whatever it would be, you can stand strong because you know that other people in the room are going to have to listen because you have the facts and you have the information. And I always say it takes a lot of work. It takes hard work.
And I'd say that's really important early in your career. Early in your career, you've got to master some things. You've got to know some stuff because that's what gets people to listen to you, right? And when you become that expert, people seek you out. Later in my career, actually what I found is that it's more important for me to realize all the things I don't know. And that allows me to rely on my team and be more of a leader, if you will, right? So what I would say to young women is, know your stuff, right? And if as you're coming up the ladder, start to know what you don't know, and be open to the fact that you're not going to know everything. You got to do a lot of learning or allow other people to take on that responsibility.
And I think successful leaders surround themselves with people who are good at the things that they're not as good at, right? So you build a team, so you analyze your strengths, the areas where you may need to have other people have strengths that you don't have, and it makes for a very, impressive and productive team. So
It does.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. So one final question.
Sure.
What's your superpower?
Wow, yeah, I gave this one a lot of thought, and I would say that I'd have to answer it in two parts, Marcia. One is that I feel like I had one when I was younger and coming up the ladder, and I've had to develop a different one as I've sitting sort of even in this role as the president of Dynex Capital. As a young person, I think it was really the ability to focus and figure out what the important thing was that needed to be handled. And I was able to do that by really putting away a lot of distractions and focusing. So somehow I was able to always see, there's all these other things that are noise, and this is the thing that needs to be focused on, and I went for it, and often I was right, meaning these were the items that needed to be focused on in the markets or in a project or whatever it was. As I've gotten more experienced, that superpower has had to change a little bit, and I have to say it comes down to things like being open, being a good listener, not being the person who's dominating the conversation. They've all been about really pulling back and allowing my awesome team to do their magic, right? So I would say now my superpower is more like allowing things to happen as opposed to younger pushing things to happen. So it's been an interesting balance.
That's great. And thank you so much for your insights today. I really enjoyed learning about your career and the 3 different stages. And you did a great job of letting us know how you personally developed at all of those different stages.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.